Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are we doing today? I didn't hear anybody. How are we doing today? Good. All right. All right. So the topic today is my faithful steward, my money tree. So I'm very excited to be speaking about this topic because if you leave me to myself, I can talk about this all day. So it's nice to be able to talk about money, talk about finances. So just like Pastor said, I've worked in the financial services industry for going on 15 years, so 14 years this year. So I want to share some tidbits that I picked up along the way. Now, when I look at this picture, right, the topic, my faithful steward, my money tree. The picture reminds me of a very popular saying, money doesn't grow on trees. I remember growing up and every time I would hear that, money doesn't grow on trees, money doesn't grow on trees. And I know we all wish money grew on trees because then you could just plant it and not have to do anything, right? But what does that actually mean? Money does not grow on trees. What it means is we have to understand the value of money, right? It's that simple. Understand the value of money. Now, money is a gift that was given to each and every one of us from God, right? You have a job, you go work, you earn money, right? It's God that gave you that job. It's God that gave you the money. In the biblical context, we're going to be looking at our anchor scripture. So we get the next slide. So our anchor scripture is 1 Peter 4, verse 10. And it says, as each of you have received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's grace. So God expects us to use our giftings, which is our money, to serve each other and to serve ourselves. So on that note, we're going to get started here. So we can get the next slide. So I want to start off by doing a quick temperature check. So if I can get each and every one of you to pull out your phones, you can either scan the QR code or you can go to slido.com and enter this code. So I'll give you 30 seconds. So let's try and be quick. So scan the QR code and get in there. And once you're in, I can see the numbers at the top right corner. Okay, wonderful. I got one person there. I will give you 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so I think we got a good number of people here. There's about 16 people there. So the question, how well do you understand financial concepts like budgeting, investing, credit, and insurance? Now that is about what I expected to see, right? So the first answer, I have an average understanding. There's about 59% of people that have an average understanding. I have little to no understanding, about 29%. So it's good that we're having this session. I have an above average understanding, so 6%. And then there's, I know it all, 6%. So whoever filled this out, I'm going to invite you to come up. I'm going to give you the mic and you're going to teach this session because I do not know it all. So who was that? Can I see a hand? No, nobody? Okay. So it's not possible to know it all, right? There's always something that you can learn, but this is perfect. This gives me an idea of where everybody stands. So we'll go to the next slide. So one thing at NCA, I see a few new faces, so I'm just going to tell you guys about NCA. One thing about NCA, we love to play games, right? Who here remembers the bottle game? Yeah, I see some hands. So for the new faces, I'm just going to explain what the bottle game is. So the bottle game, there's two opponents, okay? They're standing on each side facing each other. And there's a bottle put in between the both of them, right? So random things are yelled out. Shoulders, right? You touch your shoulders. If they say knees, you touch your knees. If they say spin around, you spin around. But the second they yell bottle, you have to reach for that bottle. The first person to get the bottle wins. That's the bottle game. So that's our NCA game. We've played that game for many, many years, okay? So one thing I know about NCA is we love to play games. So one thing we're going to do today to learn financial concepts is we're going to play a game, right? Whenever I'm learning something that I don't really care about or like, I try and make it a game, right? Make it fun. If it's not fun, then what's the point, right? So we're going to play a game today. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
All right. So you've been given a task, very simple task. You have to grow a tree that has strong roots, a strong trunk, and branches, okay? That grows healthy leaves and bears delicious fruit. Everybody understands the game? We want to build a healthy tree, okay? You have also been given all the tools that you require, which is a good soil. You've been given water, fertilizer, you have the sun, you have everything, okay? And the end goal is for us to build a successful money tree. A money tree that looks healthy, a money tree that bears fruits, okay? Now there's 4 rules that we're gonna go over a little bit later. And then there's 5 levels for us to complete this money tree, okay? With each level, we're going to build a different part of the tree. And at the very end of each level, there's going to be a take-home assignment, a little task that we have to do on the side. You can call it a side quest if you want, okay? And I will make sure to recap everything at the very end. So if you want to take notes, you can. If you don't take notes, that's okay as well. Now, we do have a Q&A session planned for the end. I will ask that you please save your questions for the end, just so we can get through the full material, and then we'll go through all the questions. All right, so let's go next slide. We're going to get started here. So everybody gets it? Yeah, everybody's with me? So our 4 rules. Rule number 1, you have to make money. It's very simple, right? So making money, I can compare that to getting a seed. You want to grow a tree, you have to get a seed. This includes earning an income, whether it's your employment income, it's business income, it's investments, right? Proverbs 10 verse 4 says, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands brings wealth. So this is a biblical context. You can't be lazy, you have to work, okay? Rule number 2, save and invest your money. Now there's a reason I put this as number 2, because usually when we get money, we have the tendency to want to do what? Spend it, right? But the first thing that you should do is save and invest your money. This is where you plant and you water that seed that you have. So this involves setting money aside for current or future use, right? So I have there paying your tithes, which is your first fruits. And that's in Proverbs 3 verse 9. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. And then also, I put in there paying yourself, because you also have to pay yourself first. Okay, next rule. Rule number 3. This is my favorite as well. Spend money. It's that simple. Enjoy the fruits of your labor. You work hard, you should be able to spend your money, right? So this entails spending the money that you earned to cover your day-to-day expenses and other expenses. Now I put a note there. Should always come after rule number 2. Should always come after rule number 2. So keep that in mind. Next rule, rule number 4. Protect and plan. So this is as simple as guarding your seed and having a routine, right? It involves safeguarding your money and having a roadmap for the future. So a little bit later, we're going to talk about insurance. We're going to talk about having a financial plan. So those are our rules. We have 4 rules. So are we ready to get the game started? Yes? Okay. All right. So next slide. So level 1, Luke 14, verse 28 to 30. It says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Can anybody guess what level 1 is? What part of the tree are we building in level 1? I'll give you a hint. The answer is in verse 28. If you want to build a tower, wouldn't you first sit down and estimate the cost? Close, very close. What was that? Rule number 4, so planning. We're going with planning. So close. So we'll go to the next slide. So rule number 1, level number 1 is budgeting and saving. So that is the very first level of building our tree. So I like to call this the roots, right? So your budgeting and your saving is where your roots are developed. So one thing you want to do when you look at budgeting and savings is you want to build healthy habits, right? If you don't budget and if you don't save, you don't have roots for your tree to grow. It's that simple, right? So when we look at budgeting, it's things like your income, your expenses, and your savings. That's a simple budget. Now, I have a question I want to ask. How many of you here have a budget? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a budget. I saw 5 hands, maybe, okay. About 8 hands, that's really good. Now, having a budget is great. How many of you actually use that budget? I see less hands. Okay, so we have a budget, it's somewhere there. Okay, and then the last question, how many of you stick to your budget if you use it? So if you go over by even 50 cents, you don't stick to your budget. So who here sticks to their budget? You can say that I budget every month and I stick to it. So I see 2 hands. So we started off with about 8 hands, and then we ended with 2 hands. So that tells me that we've got some work to do. Now, just so you don't feel bad, my hand would probably have gone down too, right? Because sometimes it's hard to stick to your budget. So we all have work to do, right? We all have budgets that we can make a little bit more achievable. Now, there's 2 formulas on the screen. Normally when people are budgeting, what they do is they say, okay, I got my income, I'm gonna pay all my expenses. Whatever's left over, that's what we'll save. That's the old way to think about a budgeting formula. The new way is, I have my income, I'm going to save first. I'm going to pay myself first. That's how you should look at your budget. So I want you to start to think about your savings almost like a expense item, right? So you have to pay your rent, you have to pay your mortgage, you have to save. It's that simple. So you get paid, pull out your expenses after you've saved money. That's my recommendation for you, okay? Now, if I say 50, 30, 20, does that mean anything to anybody? Okay, I got one person, and you're a business student, so I know that's why it means something to you. So can we get him a mic? So what does 50, 30, 20 mean to you?
So it's like the way you split your income, so to savings, to investment and spending.
That's a really good answer. That's correct. Thank you. So can we go to the next slide? So this is what 50, 30, 20 means. So this is just a guideline, right? You can tweak these numbers around, but in essence, 50% of your budget should go towards your needs. So that's your mortgage, your rent. If you have a car, that's your car payment. 30% should go to your wants. So that's your shopping, you want to take a trip, cool. That's 30%. And then roughly about 20% should go to your savings. So I have a task for each and every one of you, okay? Now, I want you, when you get home, for those of us that have budgets, if you have a budget, great. If you don't have a budget, we need to create a budget. I want you to remember this rule, 50, 30, 20. So when you go home, try and create a budget and look at what your expenses, look at how they fall, and see if you're actually following 50, 30, 20. If you're not, there's some work to be done. But on average, you should be saving about 20% of your income. On average, you should be spending 50% on the needs and 30% on your wants. Now, if you want to do something a little bit better, you can say, okay, maybe I want less on my wants, so maybe you only spend 10 to 20% there, and you can increase your savings, right? So, and then keeping in mind, you might have a car loan or something like that. That could also come from, your wants or your savings, right? So you can always tweak this number around. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, we'll pull out our phones again. I want you to answer this question. How much money should you have saved for emergencies at all times? Oh, sorry. Okay, we got 5 answers so far, so I'll give you guys a little bit more time. So somebody has been saving in heaven. So when there's an emergency, they're just gonna call God. But that's good. So, okay. All right, so I think that's about 17 people, so that's pretty good. So the highest vote is 3 to 6 months. About 32% says 1 to 3 months, 11% says 6 to 9 months. Can you hit right again? It'll tell us the right answer. Oh, sorry. Go back. Okay, so sorry. So the right answer is 3 to 6 months. So most people got that one right. So the reason it says 3 to 6 months of your earnings or expenses is in case of emergency. So say, for example, you lost your job, right? Really, you only need to cover your expenses, right? So at a minimum, you should have 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So keep that in mind. That is our rule. So my task for you, so this is the end of level 1. My task for you for level 1 is this. I want you to create or refine your budget, right? And we're going to use that 50-30-20 rule. If you're not taking notes, that's okay. I'm going to recap everything at the end as well. And then your second task, I want you to start to work towards building 3 to 6 months of savings. Whether you save your earnings or your expenses, it's up to you. But you should have 3 to 6 months of your savings. 3 to 6 months of savings that are either your earnings or your expenses. All right, so we're going to move on to level 2. So level 2, I'm reading from Romans 13, verse 7 to 8. It says, give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. And in Proverbs 22, verse 7, it says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Can anybody guess what level 2 is? The word is right in there. Debt, yeah. We have a debt here, so debt is correct. So we'll go to the next slide. Perfect. So again, we have another question. So phones out. What comes to mind when you think of debt? So number 1, I worry about debt. Number 2, it's a tool I can use to my advantage. Number 3, I have been stung before and now I avoid it. And number 4, I don't understand it. So I'll get you to answer that on your phones. Okay, so I've got about 15 people, so I think that's good. So we have a tie between 1 and 2. So I worry about debt, which is very, very normal. A lot of people worry about debt, right? And the reason you worry about debt is because if you don't fully understand debt, you'll worry about it. And the other one we have, I have been stung before and now I avoid it. Makes sense, right? If something didn't work out, you might just say, okay, I need to step away from it. A few people said, it's a tool I can use to my advantage. And then we have, I think, 1 or 2 people that say they don't understand it. So we'll go to our next slide. So I want to change your mindset about debt, right? It seems like a lot of people don't understand debt or they worry about debt. But I want you to start to think about debt like a tool that you could use effectively, right? So debt and credit, I like to call it the fertilizer. We live in a debt society, or in a credit society, I should say, right? So Canada is heavy on credit, right? There's 2 types of debt, right? So there's good debt and there's bad debt. So good debt usually is tied to an asset. So you buy a house, you get a mortgage, that's good debt. There's an asset there. You take an investment loan from the bank, you invest in your RSP, which is a retirement account. That's good debt, right? It's tied to an asset. The last one, car loan, I put a little star beside it because it's debatable if it's good or bad. And the reason I say that is, if you were to get a car loan at maybe a few years back, I think rates were like 0%, right? So you get a car loan at 0%, it's a $20,000 car. If you're paying the loan down, right, and the value and the loan amount is about the same, and you're using the car, I think that's good debt. However, if you were to get a car, it's 30% or something like that. You bought the car at $20,000, the loan is $20,000, the car is worth $10,000. That's horrible debt, right? So it is debatable depending on how your car loan is structured. Bad debt's simple. There's no assets tied to it. So your credit cards, your lines of credit. Um, Again, these are debts that you can use to your advantage, even though they are considered bad debt. Now, when we go to credit, there's two types of credit. There's revolving credit, like your credit cards and your lines of credit. And then there's installment credits, which are like your loans and your mortgages. With the installment credit, very straightforward. They give you a set amount, you pay it down over a fixed amount of time, and then it's done. With revolving credits, whatever amount you use, you're just required to pay interest on it, and then eventually you can pay it off and it disappears. One thing I want you to start thinking about when you look at debt is debt can work to your advantage, right? So now we're going to try and demystify debt. So we'll go to the next slide. So there's a very popular saying, cash is king, credit is queen, right? Now, how many people here monitor their credit? I want to see hands. You check your credit. How often do we check it? Monthly? Can I see hands if it's monthly? Yeah, okay. So that's really good. So I want to go over a credit score, what a credit score is, how it works, what affects your credit score. So starting off with your credit score. So this picture right here. So when you go to a bank, you do not want to be at the very bottom. So at the very bottom says very poor, so that's 300 to 499. You want to be above roughly 620, okay? Anything below that, what happens is it affects your approval chances, the terms you get, the interest rates you get, and in certain circumstances, your credit score can actually affect your ability to rent or get a job. There are certain jobs, so for example, working in a bank, because you're handling money, they actually check your credit score. So if your credit score is not good, it tells them, maybe this person is not good with money, right? So it's good to watch your credit score. A credit score is simple. It's just a way for them to know that, oh, this person's going to pay me back, right? So that's the way that the bank looks at you and they're like, okay, this person can pay back. So these are the things that affect your credit score. The very first thing is a history. And when I say history, there's two parts of history. So age of credit. So with age of credit, how long have you been borrowing for? So if you got a credit card 20 years ago, your credit age is 20 years, right? So what I always tell people, the very first credit card that you got, never close that card because that is the oldest credit that you have. So if you're not using that card anymore, it's okay, cut it up. Just don't close the card. Cut it up and toss the card away, but leave that card open. Because what usually happens is the first credit people get, they get a credit card and then maybe 5-10 years later, they might get a loan. Well, if you close that credit card, now you've lost 5 to 10 years of credit history. So you're going to notice that your score is going to go down by 15% of whatever your score is, okay? The second thing is your repayment history. And I can't stress this one enough because that affects your credit by about 35%. So with your repayment history, you want to make sure that you're making every single payment. So you have a credit card, make your minimum payments at the very least, right? Don't miss a payment. Don't put off a payment. Make sure that you're making every single payment. With types of credit, so the previous slide, we talked about installment credit, and we talked about revolving credit. So you want to make sure that you have different types of credit. So if you have a credit card, that's great. You need a line of credit. You need a loan. So that shows the bank that you have different types of credit and you can handle different types of credit. The frequency of your new credit applications. So car dealerships are notorious for this. So whenever you want to get a car, you go to a dealership, they're going to apply at every bank on the street because they just want to get you approved, right? But what that does is it makes you look like a guy that just runs around town asking everybody for money, right? So you want to try and avoid having too many credit applications at the same time, right? So if you can spread it out, even better. Give it 3 to 6 months. If you do it all at once, you're going to notice your score drops by about 10%, okay? Next one, outstanding revolving credit. So this usually applies to like lines of credit or credit cards. The guiding principle for this is keep your utilization under 30%. What that means is if you have a $10,000 credit card, you should not carry a balance of more than $3,000. If you know you're going to carry a higher balance than $3,000, increase the credit card, right? Another tidbit I'm going to give you guys. If the bank ever calls you and says, hey, we want to increase your line of credit or we want to increase your credit card, take it. I always tell people take it. Even if you don't use it, just take it. The reason being is if you try to go to the bank and apply for an increase, it's probably going to be harder for you to get that increase. But if you take that increase and you don't use it, the way you look to the bank is, oh, this person has a lot of credit and they barely use it. So the bank likes you more. So whenever you get those offers, you should take it and then just don't use it if you don't need it. Now, in Canada, there's two credit bureaus. There's Equifax and there's TransUnion. Have you guys heard of them before? Yeah, perfect. So those are the two credit bureaus that monitor your credit. One thing that you can do to check your credit score, I don't know if you guys have heard of, now I'm not sponsored, but I don't know if you guys have heard of Credit Karma or Borrowell. So those are tied to each of those credit bureaus. So Credit Karma, I think it's tied to Equifax, and I think Borrowell's tied to TransUnion. So my recommendation for you is I want you guys to open up a Credit Karma account and a Borrowell account, and I want you to monitor your credit monthly. Number one, it's important to know your credit and your credit score. Number two, and this is something that I saw a lot when I worked in the banks, there's a lot of identity theft that happens. And most people don't even know about it. I've had clients come into the bank and there was a credit card on their file that was maxed out. They didn't even know about it. Somebody got a hold of their information, went and got a credit card, maxed it out, right? So it's important to have a monitoring system, which Credit Karma and Borrowell do really well, because if there's a new credit application on your file, it will show on there, and then you can do something about it. Okay, so we're gonna move to our next level. So that was our takeaway for level 2. Level 3, Proverbs 27 verse 12. It says, the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. 1 Timothy 5 verse 8. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Can anybody guess what number 3 is?
Savings.
Savings, okay. Any other answers? I heard some whispers in the back. Jemima, I think I heard you say something. No? Okay. So we're going to go to the next slide and you'll see what it is. So I think one more. Perfect. So I'm going to get you guys just to pull out your phone. So number 3 is insurance. So question, how many insurance products should you have? First answer, none, I don't believe in insurance. Second answer, 1 or more insurance products. Okay, I'll give you about 10 more seconds. It's not working? Just try it again. So maybe log out and log back in. And you can either scan the QR code or just go to the website, slido.com. Is it working now?
I have things, but I don't see that.
Okay, we're gonna go next and then it'll show, yeah. Okay, I see 9 people in there. Okay, so about 100% of you voted 1 or more insurance product. That is correct. So we'll go to the next slide. So insurance, which is the trunk of our tree that we're building, you can think of insurance like financial stability, right? Now, I want to cover CDIC bank insurance. Not a lot of people know about CDIC bank insurance. So the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation was created, I think, back in the 60s. And essentially what they do is they cover bank defaults, right? If your money is with the bank, you're covered. So this is an automatic insurance that you have. You don't have to do anything about it. You just have to have an account at the bank. So what it covers your checkings, your savings, if you have a tax-free savings cash account, if you have an RSP cash account, you're all covered. It covers GICs as well. It doesn't cover, unfortunately, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and exchange-traded funds. Even cryptocurrency, not covered. And it covers up to $100,000 per account, right? So that's an automatic insurance that everybody has. We'll go to the next slide. Next slide. I just listed a few types of insurance that you can get. And there's two specifically that I want to highlight. The very first one I have on there is homeowners, but what I'm highlighting with that one is rental insurance. So if you're renting, you should have rental insurance. I remember being a student, a friend of mine had a house fire. It burned absolutely everything that she had. She didn't have renter's insurance. So she was just out of pocket. So most times I know if you're a student, maybe you have it, maybe you don't. But if you don't have it, you should get renter's insurance. I believe you can get a policy where it's like $20 a month and they cover up to like $50,000 of your personal assets. And then the second one I want to cover is life insurance. I think this one's very important just because life insurance is probably the greatest transfer of wealth, right? There's a saying, there's two things that are certain, taxes and death, or death and taxes, right? So everybody's going to die at some point. It's important to have life insurance. So my task for you with this one, if you don't already have insurance, we need to get insurance. If we already have insurance, you should be reviewing your insurance at least once a year. At least once a year. Okay, so we'll go to our next slide. Now this slide, this is probably my favorite topic of everything. So Proverbs 21 verse 5. The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. And Matthew 25 verse 14 to 30 is a little bit of a long one, so I'm just going to summarize it. So it was the parable of the talents and the master who entrusts his property to his servants. So the story in the Bible is a master was going on a trip, right? So he had 3 servants that lived with him. So he gave them different amounts of talents. So you can think of talents like cash, right? So he gave the first one 5 talents. He gave the second one 2 talents, and then gave the third one 1 talent. And he said, I'm giving you this. I'm entrusting my property with you. I'll be back. So he took a trip. When he came back, the first servant that got 5 talents was like, oh, welcome back, master. I was able to double the talents from 5 to 10. So the master was very happy. He's like, oh, wonderful. The second servant, who had 2 talents, was like, oh, I also doubled mine. So it went from 2 to 4. So the master was really happy with him. The last servant said to his master, he's like, oh, you're a wicked person who wants to earn where he didn't put money, right? So he didn't do anything with the talent. He actually just dug a hole and put it in the floor. So the master said, you could have at least given my money to the banks. I would have made a little bit, but you didn't do anything with what I trusted you with. So because of that, I'm kicking you out. So he got punished and he got kicked out, right? So that's the story of the talents. Now I want us to go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So this is the question. Why is it important to start investing early? So I'll give you guys a second to answer. Okay, I think we got 6 people so far. I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, 93%, more time for growth, that's correct. So yes, that is also correct. You do get, well, not necessarily higher initial returns. You get higher returns over a longer period of time. Lower risk, no, and immediate wealth, no. That's good. So that's really good. So we'll go to our next slide. So our next level is investing. I like to call this the branch and the leaves, right? So why do we have to invest? Why do we need to invest? Why is it absolutely important for us to invest? The very first reason is wealth preservation. So everybody here knows you've heard of inflation, right? On average, inflation is 3% a year. What does that mean? It means if you have $100 today, a year from now, your $100 is $97. It's that simple. And every year, your $100 goes down by 3%. So 97 goes to 94, and it keeps going down. So that is why you need to invest. Number one, wealth preservation. And this is an important or a nice fact to know. During COVID, inflation was as high as 9%. So inflation happens every single year. So at the very minimum, you need to preserve your wealth. The second reason we need to invest is wealth growth. So on average, investing gives you 5, 10, 15, 20%, depending on what you invest in, right? So not only do you need to preserve your wealth, you need to grow your wealth. Now, a lot of people usually think, for me to start investing, I need to save a certain amount of money to start investing. Really, all you need is $5. If you can save $5, you can invest. You can start investing today, right? So that's one thing I want us to start to think about is investing. So we'll go to our next slide. So when we say you need to invest, these are the different asset classes that you can invest in, right? So I'll start off with probably what's considered the safest. It would be bonds. So bonds are very simple. If the government wants to raise money, they want to build a highway, they'll issue out bonds. And you give them you give them your money, and they say to you, I'm going to give you this back in a year, and I'm going to give it back to you with interest. That's what a bond is. On the flip side of that is a GIC, or a guaranteed investment certificate. That's just tied to a bank. So same concept. The bank wants to raise money. They'll take your money in a GIC. They'll promise to pay you a certain interest rate. And a year later, it comes due for maturity. They'll give you your cash back with the interest. Next up, I like to kind of class these together. So we got mutual funds or ETFs. That's another type of mutual fund. ETFs, same thing, just less expensive, right? So mutual funds on average, they cost you about 1 to 3% in management fees, right? Whereas ETFs, it'd be like less than 1%, right? So if you're going to invest in that, I would go with the ETFs. And ETFs and mutual funds, all they are a basket of stocks, right? So I'm going to lump that in with stocks as well. So that is just ownership in a company, right? You buy a share of a company like Apple, for example, right? Now you're an owner of that stock. You're an owner of that company, right? With an ETF or a mutual fund, you own a bunch of companies, so it reduces your risk. On average, stocks or the stock market gets you about 10% a year, which is pretty decent. There's off cases of stocks like Nvidia that returned, I think, 26,000% or something like that, right, to date. But it's good to be investing in the stock market. Next up, we have commodities. So commodities are things like your gold, your silver. If you want to buy a gold bar or a silver bar, you can do that as well. Commodities usually on average return about 10% as well. The only thing with them is it's a physical heavy asset, right? So, not a lot of people buy those. Another thing you can invest in, real estate. So you buy a house, that's your investment. If you live in Winnipeg, I believe the housing market in Winnipeg appreciates about 3% every year. So that's what you can expect for returns, right? So, it's good to have real estate in your portfolio as well. And then this is the last one. I'm not really going to talk about that one too much. It's crypto. There's also Forex and other things like that. These are just, crypto is digital currencies. Forex is foreign exchange between currencies. The reason I'm not going to talk about that too much is because I don't want you to come back next week and say, I told you to buy some type of cryptocurrency or something and you lost your money. So we're just going to skip over that one, okay? Now, some things to note when you're investing. The very first thing is risk and reward. So there's a trade-off between risk and reward. The more risk you take, the higher the reward. The less risk you take, the lower the reward, right? So keep that in mind. Number 2, diversification. No, sorry, back to the slide. Yeah, so number 2, diversification. So you want to make sure that you are diversified when you are investing. So if you own a home, don't say, oh, I bought my house, I'm good. Because like I said, the market only appreciates 3% every year, whereas the stock market is paying you 10% a year. So you're losing on about 7% every single year. So try to diversify as best as you can. The next thing is time horizon. The longer you invest, the better off you are. So the earlier you start, the better off you are. There's a saying, the best time to invest was yesterday, the second best time is today. So if you're not already investing, I want you to start thinking about investing. And then the last thing is your strategy. So everybody's strategy is different, right? What you're comfortable with is not what the next person is going to be comfortable with. So figure out your own strategy and then use that strategy. So we'll go to the next slide. Perfect. So when we talk about investing, there's 2 types of accounts classified as non-registered or registered accounts. So with non-registered accounts, these are accounts that are fully taxable, right? So you could think of this like, say you have money in a savings account, right? And the money is just growing, you're making interest on the money. That would be considered a non-registered account because whatever interest you make, you can get taxed on 100% of it, right? The second type of account is a registered account. So you've probably heard of your tax-free savings accounts, the first home savings accounts, your RRSPs. Those are usually either after-tax investment or tax-deferred investments, right? My favorite, there's a star beside it, is a tax-free savings account. So as of this year, you can contribute, I think, up to $102,000 tax-free, and then whatever you make on that is also tax-free. So you should definitely be using your registered accounts. That is where you should be putting a lot of money. RSPs are great. You know, if you make income, you don't want to pay taxes or pay too much taxes, put money in your RSP. You're going to pay less tax. I want to highlight this next portion, the compound effect of investing. And this is why investing is very important. So say you were to save $500 a month over 30 years at 10%. 10% is on average what the stock market will get you. At the end of 30 years, you would have 1.1 million, saving $500 every single month for 30 years, okay? Now say you saved the same amount, $500, for over 30 years at 0%. And we can compare that 0% to say you just opened a savings account, right? You're not really beating inflation, so it's just a savings account. At the end of 30 years, you have $180,000. That's a difference of $959,000 because of where you put your money. You put it in the stock market, it grew to $1 million. You put it in a savings account, you're at $180,000, and you give up $959,000. So it's very important to invest, and it's good to start as soon as you can. So my task for you with this one is I would like everybody to open up a tax-free savings account. Very simple. I'll probably recommend one that you could use. So I don't know if you heard of Wealthsimple. The reason I like Wealthsimple is because it's free. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it, for your trades or anything like that. And like I said, you could start with as little as $5. So they let you buy shares. It's called fractional shares. So say a share is worth $100. You don't want $100. You want $5. You can actually buy $5 worth of that stock, right? So we'll go to the next slide. Now we have another question. So I'll get you guys to go ahead and answer this one. So if the stock market crashes, I should, and then we've got 4 answers. Panic and sell my investments. Be excited and buy more investments. It doesn't matter. I don't have any investments in the stock market, and mind my business. So I'm going to get you guys to answer it. Excellent. So we had, excellent. So we had 75% of the answers say be excited and buy more investments. Whenever the stock market crashes, you should never sell your investments. Never sell your investments. What you should do is buy more. And the reason I say that is I always like to compare it to something like a Black Friday sale or Boxing Day. When it's Black Friday or Boxing Day, you're not running away from the mall. You're running to the mall to go buy more, right? So have that same mindset. If the stock market crashes or you hear about it, that's when you should be buying into the stock market. The one advice I would give you with that though, make sure you're buying good stocks or good investments, okay? Now we'll move to our last concept. I'm just watching for time here. One more. Perfect. So our level 5, our last concept is my financial plan. These are the fruits of your labor. In Luke 14, verse 28, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? So a few questions I want to ask you. What does financial freedom look like to you? What is your amount? I remember when I was a financial advisor, I had clients that would say, my amount is $250,000 and that's what I want to retire. I heard some other clients say, I want $1 million, that's what I want to retire. So you need to figure out what your amount is. What are your goals, short, medium, and long term? So the pictures I have on the screen, for myself, financial freedom is traveling where I want, when I want, right? So you decide what it is for you, and then we're going to start to work towards that. So we'll go to the next slide. This is, I think, close to our last slide. So most times when you go to the bank, they might tell you, we have a financial planner that we could set you up with. This is a simplified version of what they usually do for you, right? So they try and plan out your life all the way out to 30 to 40 years, roughly. So what I want you to do is take note of the year category. So we got 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 30. When you go home, I want you to try and come up with a financial plan for yourself, right? So this is just kind of like a recommendation. So 1 to 3 years, maybe you want to build an emergency fund and save for vacation. 3 to 5, you want to buy a car, pay it off. 5 to 10, maybe buy a house. But each and every one of you should have something like this that you look at every single year. It's like your roadmap, right? It keeps you honest, it keeps you having a goal, and it keeps you having something that you could work towards. So we'll go to our next slide. This is our recap slide. So we've gone through level 1 to 5, and these are your tasks for each level. So if you want to take a picture, feel free to take a picture of this. So number 1, you want to create a budget and start to build your emergency savings. Number 2, you want to open up a Credit Karma and a Borrow Well account. Number 3, get life insurance. Very, very important. Number 4, you want to start investing. So open up a Wealth Simple tax-free savings account, and you can start investing with as little as $5. Number 5, I want you to start the plan. So figure out what your timeline looks like. The 2 things that I want you to remember to protect yourself from, number 1 is inflation, the silent thief or the silent killer, as I like to call it. And then number 2 is identity fraud, all right? So in summary, your money tree requires constant care. How healthy is your tree? That's a question that I want us to ask ourselves. How healthy is my tree? So yes.
Sorry. We'd like to keep to our time here. Brother Walter would hang around. Brother Walter would hang around. I still see questions, but we want to ensure we keep to our time. So Brother Walter would hang around. If you have any questions, you can meet him after the service. And we would make this available to everyone. We won't put it on our website, right, because it's a private document, but you can send us an email. If you want the document, send the email to info@ncawinnipeg.ca, and we will send this out to you. And then you can meet any of us, either myself, Brother Walter, or Sylvester, to get details of how we can send it to you. All right, so please let's clap for Brother Walter again. That's why I said this is why we like to do seminar services, because we believe that God cares about every aspect of you. And if we have these resources in-house, rather than go and pay for it, the church, gives it, to us. So we thank God for that. And for me, one of the things I want to point out before we close the service is that there is nothing new You know, when Walter thinks finance, I think Bible. we're different, right? Not that I don't think finance is well. But as he was talking about the new way to invest, remember he talked about the old way was your income, expense, and savings. And the new way, he said, income, savings. It's not new, it's in the Bible. It's not new. And as he kept talking about it, my mind went to Genesis chapter 41. Remember Joseph and Pharaoh? How did Joseph save Egypt? Let's read it quickly. If you can get it on the screen quickly, please do. But if you can't, I'll read it. Genesis chapter 41, verse 33. Now, this is Joseph speaking. He said, "Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land in the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather it and save it." So what did Joseph say? Before they eat, let them gather the savings and save it. So these principles it's just that and you know the thing, every financial principle is in the Bible. You know, we just have to follow it. And I pray that God will give us understanding in the name of Jesus. So like I said, Brother Walter is available after service. You can please reach out to him. Let's rise up as we close the service. Let's take our closing.